Marie studied science. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and the only person to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields, but sadly, she died believing that she had made a terrible mistake. So what did Marie do wrong? Well, let me tell you her story. Maria Sklodowska was born in Warsaw, Poland in 1867. Her mother was a teacher and her father was an engineer. He taught Maria and her siblings at home and recognized that his daughter was very smart. Unfortunately, he died when Maria was just 10 years old. Then her mother had to support the family by working as a teacher, and so Maria had to leave school at the age of 14 to work as a governess, taking care of other people's children. Despite this, she continued to study at night, and when she was 23, she went to Paris to attend university. There she met a man called Pierre Curie. He was a physics professor and also the son of poor immigrants. Together they had a daughter and then another one. Life was hard, but they supported each other. Then in 1902, Marie graduated with a degree in physics. She was now a qualified scientist. At university, Marie and her husband Pierre started doing research into a mysterious glowing substance called radium. It emitted huge amounts of energy, and it didn't seem to follow the laws of physics. Most scientists thought that this glow came from the atoms of the element itself, but Marie and Pierre disagreed. They believed that it came from the element transforming into something else, but they couldn't figure out what. So, in 1898, they published a paper where they claimed that this glow wasn't actually coming from the element itself. However, the scientific community largely ignored their work. But a few years later, the Curies were awarded a prize for their work on radioactivity. This is what the glowing substance was called. Pierre loved doing experiments. He even designed some equipment to measure radiation. He wanted to name this device the Curie, but unfortunately, he never saw it finished because he died in 1906. Just imagine how sad this must have been for Marie. Not only had she lost her husband, but she also had 2 young daughters to take care of. To make things worse, she was pregnant again. And, yes, you heard right, she got pregnant despite already being married. How could this be? Well, here's the thing. When Pierre died, Marie was devastated. She spent much of her time alone, not talking to anyone. One day she found herself thinking about a colleague of hers named Paul Langevin. He was married, but his wife was in. So Paul and Marie began to write letters to each other. Soon these letters became more personal and they eventually started a secret affair. A year after Pierre's death, Marie gave birth to a son and everyone assumed that he was Pierre's child. But in reality, Paul was the father. Before long, the affair was discovered and Marie's reputation was ruined. People called her a traitor and said that she had killed her husband. It seemed like everyone hated her. Even her own daughter said, "You killed my father." But this wasn't true. In fact, Pierre had died after stepping in front of a horse-drawn carriage to help a woman who had dropped her basket. Marie was heartbroken to hear people blaming her for her husband's death. But she knew that there was nothing she could do to change their minds. She threw herself into her work and in 1911, Marie was awarded a Nobel Prize for her discovery of radium and polonium. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. At this point, she was famous all over the world. People wanted to meet her and take her picture, but Marie always stayed humble. She was once invited to a party by a wealthy woman who said, "I want to show you what a beautiful evening gown costs." She then showed Marie a dress worth $100,000 today. But Marie didn't understand the value of expensive clothes. She replied, "I know what it feels like to spend an evening in a dress, but I don't know what it feels like to spend an evening in a thought." During World War I, Marie traveled around the battlefields of France, visiting wounded soldiers and doctors. She created mobile X-ray units called petify, which are still used today. She was passionate about helping others. Once she was giving a lecture in a small village. Afterwards, a woman approached her and said, "Madame Curie, I am too poor to pay for my son's treatment. Can you help me?" Marie took them aside and whispered, "How much money do you need?" When the woman told her the amount, Marie reached into her pocket and pulled out some radium to give her. Of course, she had no idea that this would cause the woman and her son to develop cancer. Sadly, this wasn't the last time something like this happened. In 1921, Marie established the Radium Institute in Warsaw, Poland. Here, she trained future scientists and also treated thousands of sick people. Again, she didn't realize that she was harming them. You see, radium was highly radioactive, and it was also freely available. Anyone could walk into the institute and take some radium with them, and so many people did this, including Marie's own staff. Over the years, many of them developed severe health problems and died. And although this was tragic, it helped to further our understanding of radiation poisoning. Throughout her career, Marie performed countless experiments, but she was very careless. She never wore gloves when handling radium and often carried it in her pocket. In her lab, she mixed radium with her food so that she could eat it during her experiments. Sometimes she looked at radium crystals under a microscope. While holding them in her mouth, she even applied radium cream to her face because she thought that it would improve her skin. As you can imagine, this made her very ill, and she eventually developed blood cancer. Towards the end of her life, Marie realized that she had made a big mistake. She believed that radium was a miracle cure. She really thought that eating it or putting it on your skin could help you. In 1934, she died believing that she had caused many innocent people to suffer and die. But let's go back in time to 1914. Now, you see, Marie wasn't the only person studying radium. There was also a man called Frederick Soddy. He was a chemist who worked with Marie and Pierre. Together, they discovered that elements could be transformed into other elements. For example, if you bombard nitrogen with alpha particles, then it turns into oxygen. But Frederick thought that something was missing from the periodic table, and that there were undiscovered elements between the known ones. For example, he predicted that there was an element called scandium between titanium and vanadium. In 1937, a German team of scientists managed to produce. They bombarded titanium with neutrons and created a new element. But this was during World War II. No one really cared about scientific discoveries at this point. After the war ended, more scientists began to study the periodic table, and they discovered several new elements. Today, we have confirmed that there are over 100 elements in the universe. These include radium and polonium, which were discovered by Marie Curie. They're both located in the center of the periodic table next to each other, and interestingly, the space above radium has remained empty until recently. Scientists failed to discover the element because it was far too unstable. However, in 2022, researchers in Russia finally created it. They bombarded calcium with protons and produced a small amount of radium. Before long, it's likely that we'll discover even more elements. Who knows what amazing discoveries the future will hold? So was Marie Curie's life a success or a failure? Well, it really depends on how you look at it. On the one hand, she made groundbreaking discoveries that helped to advance our knowledge of science. She also developed life-saving technologies and trained many future scientists. However, she also caused many innocent people to die, and she ended up ruining her own reputation. Ultimately, Marie was a complex person who made both good and bad decisions. But one thing is for sure, if you study science, then it's very likely that you've heard her name. If you enjoyed this video, then check out my channel. Thanks for watching.